Broadcasting. Okay, people are going to come in. Welcome, everybody. It's Ari Roseman. I'm here with that 4K virtual conference number 9. I can't believe it's number 9 already. But that's, I would say that's, that's fun. When time flies, you're having fun, but we're not exactly having fun. Hopefully, we'll have a live event soon. I was telling the panelists that June 11th, hopefully, we will be in Minneapolis at Target Fields. I'd say God willing, but it's more like vaccine willing. But of course, after this event, we got that 4K virtual conference, national virtual conference on January 21 and 22. A whole bunch of people going to be there. Walt Frazier from the New York Knicks. He's also a New York Knicks broadcaster and a member of the National Basketball Hall of Fame. My close personal friend, Dwight Gooden, the Retireaholics, and a whole bunch more. So go to that4ksite.com for further information on how you can be a part of it for only $33.33. And if you want autographs and all that kind of stuff, you could certainly bump that up as well. And go to that4ksite.com for further information on how you could be a part of what will be a fun national virtual event. All the perks of being live except for the food. I can't manage all those Uber Eats orders. Sorry. So without further ado, I want to introduce Mark Copen from FPS Trust. FPS Trust has been a big support of my events over the last couple of years, and they offer a great solution that I think is quite problematic with most plan sponsors. So Mark, take it away.
Thank you, Ari. It's great to be here, and thanks for offering the opportunity again to do this on a Friday afternoon. What I wanted to talk about today is related to the missing participants, some of the things that we're working on related to cleaning up the entire process for a plan sponsor. I want to take you through some of the items related to the Secure Act, and as an advisor, things that you'll need to talk with your clients about related to the part-time employees and collection of hours, the things that are occurring with the missing participants from a regulatory standpoint, and what the private industry is doing for it, and then how we're working to bring together the best of the options under the current regulations to clean up and support the entire process, from the mandatory force outs to uncashed checks and eliminating missing participants altogether. So under the Secure Act, this is going to be problematic for a lot of smaller mid-sized plan sponsors. So effective January 2021, you're going to have the service requirement to offer a retirement benefit to those part-time employees, and longer part-time employees you don't have to worry about until 2024 from a contribution standpoint, but effective January 1, those hours and prior years need to be tracked to determine their long-term employment, part-time employment, and vesting on any employer contributions that are now allocated to those part-time employees. So the employers and know from history, my personal history, working with a lot of employers and mainly hospital organizations and nonprofits, that the collection of hours doesn't always go smoothly, and historical data can get lost in transfer of data between providers, whether it's record keeper or payroll providers. So this is something that really should be an immediate conversation that you're having with your employers, talking about the collection of those hours historically and going forward. So this is going to be problematic in the sense that now you have more part-time employees participating in the plan that you hadn't thought about before. And because they're part-time, they're not going to be sinking a lot of money into the retirement plan. It's going to create a lot more work for the plan sponsor to maintain those small balance accounts. It's going to increase plan costs with the record keeper. You're going to have more missing participants to continue to track down and locate. Then with the dilemma of the uncashed checks, missing participants that the Secure Act's creating, we have the historical problem with missing participants in these plans with uncashed or stale dated checks. So missing participants are really defined as someone who was an employee, left the qualified retirement plan, and their former employer is failing to keep track of their information or has tried to locate them but has been unable to. So those missing participants are people that are identified by the post office with return mail, return emails, no forwarding numbers, can't locate a new phone number for those individuals, can't locate a web activity, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. You're just having a hard time finding the right person. And you have an outstanding distribution check. And these outstanding distribution checks primarily make up are from the mandatory force outs where the cash out occurred under $1,000. But you have other uncashed checks that come back into the plan, and those are going to be ineligible employer contributions, excess loan payments, minimum distribution payments, death payments to beneficiaries. So there's a host of uncashed check issues that reside in a plan, and they're not all easily resolved just by sending out notices and making these people aware of their benefit. So an unresponsive participant is someone that you've, obviously been able to locate, but they're just not being able to take any action for whatever reason. They just fail to do so. One of the biggest things that we encounter when we're working with these employees is the fact that they're in a transition period, and the retirement plan or the information from the former employer gets set aside because they're focused on moving forward or moving to whatever new activity they're participating in with another employer, and things just go unanswered. They don't have the bandwidth to take care of it all. So really what we're trying to do is be that backstop to engage these people, provide them alternative options, and be the safekeeper of those assets until they do get around to collecting their thoughts and contacting us to help them through the transition of their money from one retirement plan to another IRA or another retirement plan itself. So these missing participants are creating more administrative burden for plan sponsors, continued plan leakage. There's actually significant risk to the plan sponsor as fiduciary breach and also an audit risk where the plan sponsor may be going through a normal DOL audit, if any DOL audit's normal, but they're really focusing on participants that have not been kept up with. The DOL's looking to the employer to provide specific written instructions on how they are dealing with missing participants. Their time frame for searching for a new address, what communication goes out, and their follow-up on that participant indefinitely until that participant is resolved. You are also potentially looking at class action lawsuits on missing participants, and that may become more prominent if the state Treasurers Association, they're floating an idea of creating a clearinghouse of sorts to collect all of the ERISA assets and force the record keepers, TPAs, plan sponsors to transfer these ERISA assets to the states in a achievement process. Now that goes against what ERISA preempts in this situation, but the states are lobbying hard to collect all this ERISA money and create more of a windfall for the states to help them balance their budget shortfalls. So given that, there's going to be quite a few attorneys looking at this option as a way to bring lawsuits against record keepers or plan sponsors for escheating money that should be preempted because of ERISA. You also have compliance issues with minimum distributions. IRS tax withholding and penalties are an issue if they're escheated to the state. And even if you're looking at creating a better experience for your plan sponsors, this is really an easy way to eliminate the early withdrawal penalties to the plan participants by decreasing the rollover value to everything under 1,000. So you're looking for a provider that will take all accounts from a penny to $5,000 in the mandatory force out process. And that eliminates the forced cash out. It eliminates missing participants because once it's in the IRA, it's in the name of the individual, constructive receipt's been made, and the participant no longer has that tax penalty, and the plan sponsor has no fiduciary liability at that point. And once we get into a polling question here, just briefly, you can answer in the chat box, and I'll look at the answers at the end, but I'm curious what you believe or who you believe has a responsibility for handling the uncashed checks and locating missing participants in the plans, whether it's a plan sponsor, the record keeper, a third-party administrator, or if it's both the plan sponsor and the record keeper. So as I'm going through the next slides, if you want to just go ahead and send that through the chat function, I'll take a look at those in a little bit here. So what's at stake? Really, there's a big number here of individuals. You have about 30% of the workforce that leave a retirement account behind at a former employer. You're looking at about 16 million accounts that have a balance of $5,000 or less, and 8.5 billion in total assets. And this is from government accountability study that they did on this subject back in 2017, and then they also did another uncashed check survey program for the Senate back in 2019. So these are large numbers, and this is what the Government Accountability Office had estimated based on the responses they did to their survey, and in figuring out what their recommendations would be to the DOL and IRS on this issue. So the government and their enforcement efforts, really their DOL is focusing on uncashed checks and missing participants. There's some indication and some talk behind the scenes that the DOL may be coming out before January 20th with some guidance related to uncashed checks and retirement plans. So we'll see how that plays out and what that does to the market. But the IRS came out in November with some guidance related to the escheatment of money to the states that are ERISA assets. And they indicated that any escheatment to the states, the tax reporting would have to be done for the year of the distribution. And all of that creates some additional problems in escheating money to the state. So it wasn't a clear cut, we're going to make this easy for the states to obtain the money. It was more of a clarification that if you're going to escheat, and primarily if it's a terminating plan, that's how they would escheat under the Field Assistance Bulletin 2014-01 as a last option in that Field Assistance Bulletin. But it creates a lot of problems for the record keepers in making that that distribution, tax reporting, and escheatment to the state all happen easily and efficiently. So there's a lot of work and a lot of problems that come with that. So some of the other key issues that the government is looking at here, well, looking back over time, this is how we've come to create the Safe Harbor IRA product itself. In 2001, the EGTRA Act was signed by Bush. They implemented the Safe Harbor protection, increased the value from $3,500 to $5,000, but accounts from $1,000 to $5,000 had to be rolled into an IRA. And then between 2005 and 2014, there was more, I guess, more work around creating better products and maturation of the product itself, the market. So over the course of time here, we've created, private market has created better and better products, better tools and solutions to help these plan sponsors deal with this issue that the DOL inadvertently created when they said that when they didn't clarify that accounts under 1,000 could be rolled into an IRA. They just kind of left it, they said they could be cashed out, but they didn't say that they couldn't be rolled over either. So we're trying to clean up that issue and create an overall product again that addresses all of this. So in 2016, DOL started the program to estimate what problem they had really related to missing participants. And that was the start of their initiative and what they continue to focus on currently with plan sponsors and their audits. Again, the GAO and their report offered up some suggestions to the recommendations to the IRS and the DOL. The IRS has ruled on that recommendation and took that into advisement and issued their guidance. And the DOL has yet to make any clarification as to what can occur with the uncashed check as part of the retirement plan and what you can do with that. Part of that is the determination of an uncashed check, whether it's a plan asset or not. In a 93 American Banking Association, the DOL had issued an advisory letter, and in there, the DOL had pointed out that there is, it's like common knowledge that an uncashed check still needs to be negotiated. and that it would be considered a plan asset. You have attorneys arguing that they're not a plan asset. So if you believe that it's a plan asset, the general rule is that if it's a plan asset, it's under 5,000, you send out a notification and you perform a mandatory distribution. You roll it into an IRA. And that's the logic that we're using based on our interpretation that it is a plan asset. So if it's an uncashed check, you go through the process to locate the participant. Then you send out the notice, provide them notice, and if they don't respond, then you go through the process to roll the money over to an IRA program. We talked about the state efforts a little bit. Again, they're pushing hard with the DOL to create a clearinghouse to transfer the ERISA assets into the state coffers. And they've made some efforts with the ERISA Advisory Council that's under EBSA and the DOL as part of their recommendation back in November of 2019. And there is some traction with this within the DOL, given some of the information we've received or conversations we've had with folks there. But in the end, rules would have to change. They'd have to they'd have to go through ERISA and create an exemption. Our program currently works within the current rules. No regulatory changes are necessary, and a solution can be had and made within the private sector. Unlike Elizabeth Warren, who thinks that, she wants to continue to push this effort to create a lost and found system and have Treasury create a program to collect these accounts. Again, in the private sector, we go through great pains to locate these individuals, communicate to them, and give them the options and help them with that process. With the federal program, there's always shortfalls, and they may not always have the same capacity or same vision of getting these people reunited with their money. So they, have a tendency to sit on it. So where are we with a solution within the safe harbor market? As a safe harbor IRA provider, there are several providers in the market, and like all of other financial service areas, we've seen a consolidation effort where a few companies here are buying up some of the competition or buying into the market to gain market share. That's just creating more of an uncompetitive environment, and not giving the participants really options or plan sponsors options in a competitive, fair pricing environment, and limiting the participants' ability to invest in other programs or other investments, or provide a default fund that has a higher than market guaranteed rate of interest, crediting rate, which can also be a guarantee to the participant as well, given the right product. We've also seen effort by a couple companies to create a portability process, being able to move or consolidate a plan, a participant's account from one plan that they left, and looking through other record keepers to see if this person exists somewhere else. And then they would automatically combine those accounts without the participant's authorization or acceptance of the fees that the company is charging. And the DOL granted them a fiduciary exemption for that process. But in the end, again, having that type of portability limits the participants' ability to manage their account if, not everybody's on top of it. And if they're moving this account into another ERISA plan, well, now you're tied up under the rules of the new plan. You may not have access to it under the new plan. Under an IRA account, you don't have the issues with spousal consent, and maybe in a planning process, maybe that's something that the participant wanted to maintain. By moving it into another ERISA plan, now you've locked that up and you're bound by the terms of the new plan document. So just a broad brush approach like that doesn't allow for individuals to make the choice that they want to make for their own situation. So see some problems with portability, and over time, that may become a better program. But I can tell you now that, what we're doing, working with individuals, we do that portability and offer that assistance to them given their situation. So we're much more hands-on with an individual in that manner. Then you have record keeper solutions. Most record keepers still have their own solution. The problem is most of them don't take accounts under 1,000. They have a bad address, and they record that on the record. I've seen several record keepers this year say that they don't even include those people in the mandatory force out process. So you're not getting all the participants moved out of the plan if you're using a record keeper solution. So it's very possible that you're creating more cost for your plan sponsors and you're not even aware of it. Then you have missing participants, where the uncashed checks, the record keepers have a process to look for these individuals or find a new address for these individuals on some sort of frequency. And if they don't have a bad address record, they're not looking for them. They assume that the address is correct. So there's a big discrepancy here related to when they search or how often they search, and the quality of information that they're receiving, since a lot of them, a lot of the addresses that they receive back are duplicates of what they had previously. So we're looking to align the goals of the plan sponsor, the record keeper, using the current regulations of the Department of Labor and the IRS, and helping you as an advisor put this together as a added benefit to your plan sponsors and to give you the ability to offer a solution that is at no cost to the plan sponsor. So we work hard to help with the fiduciary and their goals in locating missing participants, help them minimize their risk. We're, again, complying with the current regulations and working within those regulations to provide an all-inclusive, comprehensive approach to this process. And again, doing what's in the best interest of those participants and preserving those benefits with nominal fee based account, no transactional fees, no statement fees, no search fees. Just everything we're doing is to benefit the participant while trying to keep the lights on. So our process, it's a busy slide, I know, but again, to take you through this quickly, we go through data gathering and eligibility. We do all we can to do a participant location, find historical data that matches up so that we ensure that we're looking at the right individual and communicating to them, have a workflow process that automates not only the participant location, but the death master record or death master file matching, sending out the notifications, do all the process and coding and tracking of those transactions or requests, and then providing that information back to the service provider to resolve the issues with the uncashed checks related to that process. And we can also apply this to a mandatory force out process, taking over the entire process for a plan sponsor and evaluating the information that the record keeper has, doing participant location, doing notifications, and providing the transaction information to the record keeper so that they process the remaining participants who failed to respond and transfer those into an IRA. So again, this is all encompassing from the mandatory force out, location of missing participants, and the cleanup and ultimate resolution of those missing participants with uncashed or stale dated checks. So here, this is my information. I've partnered with Samantha Peterson of the Peterson Group. She is an unclaimed property consultant, expert in her field, 25 years of experience. So combining our expertise with her front-end process in really participant location and notification, that automation that she would use in her achievement process with non-ERISA assets, she's applying here to the ERISA business and really supplementing a significant void in what other service providers and even record keepers are offering today. And with our Safe Harbor IRA solution, we have total control and ability to offer the best IRA solution to a plan sponsor. It's low cost, guaranteed fixed interest fund that has a credited rate of 1.25%. And our only fee is $20 annually. So again, low cost, high quality service, and options into other investments, mutual funds, and transfer into a health savings account if the person's has a high deductible health plan that they're eligible for, so they could eliminate any tax consequence on their IRA rollover as well. So unique solutions that we offer these participants and plan sponsors, and love to partner with all of you, and love for you to give us a shot. Thank you for your time. Ari, you can take it back.
Thank you so much. But there are a couple of questions if you just want to answer quickly.
Absolutely.
Mike wants to know what tracking. I know that tracking down missing participants is low priority for bundle record keepers, but what about TPAs? Is it low priority for them as well, or do they make more of an effort in regard than bundle record keepers?
They are actually less inclined to locate missing participants. They rely on the record keeper as well. Generally, if they are actually maintaining the records themselves, they don't have the, I guess, buying power to offer a substantial solution, and they may only run an address search once a year. So,
okay. Do you have a ballpark as the percentage of missing participants that you locate who are actually deceased? Is it a significant percentage?
No, it's not usually a significant percentage. There's probably maybe 2 out of 100, 3 out of 100. There's not a lot of deceased participants that we run into, but we do run into them.
How hard is it to locate participants really?
You'd be surprised. It is pretty difficult from time to time. If people want to disappear, they can disappear. I've had few situations this year trying to track down a beneficiary, and we had to go through actually a private investigator, track down some public records, and found out that the individual had been in trouble and was trying to live off the grid. But we were able to find him, find his mother, who got him a message, and able to pay out his deceased father's death benefit to him. So it's hard. It can be hard. It can be easy too, but
at what point would the state take ownership of the asset, such as the employee would lose the asset to the state? So, Mark mentioned that the states want the ERISA assets to offset budget shortfalls.
So every state has their own achievement timeline, their aging requirements. It really, in a terminating plan, you have to go through each individual and what state they reside in. Some states have a 2-year period where you don't have any activity or any communication with the participant. There are some states 3, 5, and maybe even 7 years on the outside end. But states are tightening that up because they want the hands on the money sooner. So.
Okay. Last but not least, another problem with part-time employees inclusion is it can turn a small plan to a large plan for 5,500 purposes. Do you think plan sponsors who are on the cuff, 80 participant range, will be much more proactive locating missing participants?
They should be, especially, when they're starting to top out and try and avoid that annual audit expense. So the smaller employers, we definitely have a number of those that we help every year going through process, locating participants and doing mandatory force out before year end to get those accounts off the books so they don't have to do the 5,500, full 5,500.
Okay, great. Mark, I appreciate it. As always, I always find it informative, and I always feel like if, especially with missing participants and rollover IRAs, that your company offers the perfect solution.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Art.
Out there. So I appreciate it. Our next presentation is James Moyna. Don't worry, we're over time, but I will make it up with my next presentation. But our next presenter is James Moyna, JM CPA. He's a audit firm. Well, he runs an audit firm in Chicago, Atlanta, and around the country, providing audit services. James, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks, Ari. I will go ahead and get my screen shared here and get the presentation up.
I see it.
There we go. Okay, so welcome everyone. And Ari, thank you for the invitation to speak today. As Ari mentioned, I'm James Moyna, founder of a firm that actually now is operating nationwide with the way we have to do audits nowadays remotely and via Zoom, and specializing in audits of qualified retirement plans. Just to give you a brief background, I've been doing plan audits for more than 20 years. And prior to that, I had 6 years worth of experience doing plan administration, compliance testing, participant allocations, plan documents, and so forth. So that background lent itself very well to the audit work that we do today. And today I want to focus a little bit on our relationship and working with advisors, the advisor community, leveraging that relationship. We have found the advisor community to be a terrific source of referrals and information when we do our audits, because advisors typically have a very strong relationship with the plan sponsor, and they know a lot of things about what's going on with the plan throughout the year. And so we like to work with them closely in doing our audits. So I'm going to give you a little, just kind of a bird's eye view, State of the Union regarding plan audits. Then I'm going to move into and talk a little about prospecting, some ways that we work with the advisor community to prospect for new business. Talk to you a little about what that looks like also during the audit, while we're out in the field looking at documents and seeing what is there and what's going on with the plan. Then I'll touch just briefly about some things on the horizon. There are some new audit standards that have come out. They've been deferred another year, which I think was welcomed by probably everyone, but I'll touch on those. And then just kind of wrap up with a couple of thoughts on how we, as the audit firm, can actually be a valued team member when it comes to running a plan. I certainly appreciate the comments earlier about efforts made to keep the count under what is necessary to trigger an audit, and certainly appreciate that the cost and the effort that goes into an audit can be burdensome for a plan sponsor. So well aware of that, and we really strive to be that valued team member, to add some value to that process, to make it as easy as possible for everyone involved, plan sponsor, advisors, consultants, etc. So as far as kind of a state of the union, we just yesterday pulled some information and some statistics from the DOL site on 5,500 filings. And there are approximately 79,000 plans that are audited annually. So these are the plans that are over that 100 participant threshold, requiring a plan audit, typically $5 million in assets and above. We noticed that, and consistent with many previous years, that nearly 70% of those filings happen in October, or in some instances even later. In my mind, that is just it's interesting to me. I've never been known for my patience, so we have a system that I'm going to touch on a little bit later in our presentation on how we can get audits started early and get them completed before the initial deadline, which is 7 months after year end. So we really have a system to address that and get that work done and wrapped up as early as possible. We also noticed that 20% of the filings were actually filed on the day, October 15. 20% of those filings occurred, and some, I think it was nearly 2,000 plans that were filed for the 2019 plan year were passed October 15, placing those plan sponsors at risk of fines and penalties. And if they think the audit was a headache, getting fined for the audit being late is just a little more salt in the wound. And that happens probably far too often, really, than it should. So when it comes to prospecting, there's a site that we really like to use. It has some advantages and disadvantages that I'll talk about in a moment. But the site where I got the information that I just shared with you is the URL is there, efast.dol.gov. You go to that site and you can look up filings. And it's really useful for looking up a single filing at a time. And you can do some searches on a broader scale, which I'll touch on in a moment. So what you're seeing on this screen is actually a screenshot of what you see when you go to that site. And on the far right, the search for filings button is where you would go. In fact, I've never even used the other two buttons. I'm not even sure what they're for. But if you hit that search button, you'll be able to put in a plan name or preferably if you have the federal ID number of the plan sponsor, it's a much more accurate way to find filings. And the advantages of using that site is that it's really what I would call primary source data. It's when the return gets filed with the DOL, that's where the DOL puts it. Now there are other services that I used to use in previous practices and whatnot. Judy Diamond, Larkspur. I think it's Brightscope or Brightstar. Might be getting that name wrong. But that's where they get this information, and they will disseminate it and make it more user friendly. And many of you are probably familiar with that because of the user friendliness aspect of it. This site, however, is where that comes from. So this is the source data. The filings out there also can include the audited financial statements, which is terrific because we can then see what's going on with the plan and things disclosed in those financial statement footnotes. The disadvantages, again, it really is primarily used for one plan at a time. So you need to know exactly who you want to look up. If you don't put in the right name, you're very unlikely to get the filing you're looking for. And by that, I mean, if there's a comma in the plan name and you get it wrong, it will not, the search will not work. You can put in, I think there's a minimum number of letters, 4 or 5 letters. If you know the first 5 letters of the company name, that might be something that actually gets you to the filing. Beyond that, there are some data sets that you can get if you want to do a broader search. And I'll just touch on that briefly. So this screen shows you the lower portion of that search screen on the DOL site. And the second bullet point, there are some clickable links here. And the second bullet point that talks about Form 5500 data sets webpage. If you click on that, it takes you to a spot where you can pull data and download it into Excel. And that's what we did. And we pulled the data from the Schedule H. So it goes by schedule. So it'll be first Form 5500, and that'll be just the first 3 pages of the 5500. And then you could do Schedule A, C, H, any schedule that gets filed. And it downloads all the raw data that's on that form into Excel. So again, that's what we used to give you those stats that I talked about earlier. And I think it's a great wealth of information. You do have to spend some time slicing and dicing it and getting it into a format that's actually usable to and for you. And because we've already done that and have expended the effort, and for your joining us today, if you would like a copy of it, I'd be more than happy to send it to you. So I've got that in a spreadsheet. Right now it's got, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 tabs on it that we set up. That was information that we thought would be useful. There's a tab that shows who the auditor was. There's a tab that shows the timing of the audits, when they got filed. It includes information on plan assets. So just think of in your mind anything that's on the form Schedule H, it's in the raw data of those Excel files. And again, if you would like a copy, you can then take it and modify it for your needs, or maybe even just use it as is. In my mind, that is very useful in looking at, in particular, those filings that happened on October 15th and after. Those are probably, not always, but probably plan sponsors that aren't real thrilled with their auditor in getting their report right on the due date or even after, and might present some opportunities for discussion about who could do the audit next year. So again, on a prospecting nature, when we're looking at plans and the things that have been filed, there's a wealth of information available via the Form 5500 and the audit. I pointed out on these next couple of slides some things that we look for. We talked about the timing. So the very front page is going to show you who signed the 5500 and when. If you flip to page 2 of the 5500, you're going to see some information on the participant counts. Maybe they've gone up or down significantly. Maybe they're bouncing right along that count that might kick them over to require an audit. A lot of good information there that's helpful in prospecting. The Schedule H is going to ask a question on whether or not there were any late deposits. And they often occur, so don't be too alarmed if you see that. But if you see it year after year, you see large dollar amounts of amounts being reported as late, those might be some conversation starters when talking to a plan sponsor. A couple other items, the fidelity bond. Plans, as you know, should have a fidelity bond for the right amount. Sometimes we see plans out there that need an audit but haven't had one done, and it's not attached to the 5,500. Those are plan sponsors that are probably have already received notices from the DOL or will be about to, looking for those 5,500s. Probably indicative of a plan sponsor that needs some help in that regard. And then in flipping to the audited financial statements that are going to be included with that 5,500 filing, there's a lot of required disclosures, and then there's also oftentimes some very good information. You may not be aware of this, but for example, for a 2019 audit, the audited financial statement is going to cover January 1 to December 31st. The footnotes, however, need to disclose any material transactions. Now that's based on auditor judgment, what is material, but they need to disclose any material transactions that happened after year end through the date on which the audit is issued. So say, for example, a report issued in October for 2019 needs to have a subsequent event footnote that discusses anything that may have been material that happened from January 1st of 2020 through October of 2020. So that's where you might see some information about plan mergers, divestitures, plan amendments. Oftentimes there's going to be some really good information in there that can be useful to someone having a conversation with the prospect. It shows you have done your research and you know some things about their plan and have thought about some ways you can help. So one of the things that we do for our advisor contacts and friends is we do just what I described. We go through those statements and we put together a summary of the things that we think are of note. We don't want to take the approach of, we think something's wrong because we don't have that much information to know that. We just want to point out things that, again, are conversation starters, things that might lead to opportunity. So this is a live example on this slide of 4 items that we noticed on a filing that we provided to the advisor that was prospecting on this particular plan. First, we noticed the timing. As you might know, have picked up on, I'm a bit of a stickler on timing. This one was filed October 12th. Plan mergers. This was something that was probably in the subsequent event footnote that I talked about earlier. And it talked about some merger activity happening that's probably going to make the plan grow significantly in assets and so forth. We noticed a couple of things on footnote 5 and note 7 in the financial statements that just didn't seem appropriate or to fully disclose all of the things that are required to be disclosed in a financial statement. And in the last one, the tax status, it talked about a tax determination letter that was 23 years old. So I'm pretty confident that that is outdated and needs to be updated, and maybe just those records obtained and update that footnote. But it caught our eye, those items, and really gave the advisor some things to talk to that prospect about that had they not spoken to us or some audit firm may not have been aware of going into those conversations. So the audit, just to kind of let you know, what in the world are auditors doing when they're doing their audits? Big picture, I kind of think of it as 2 really big things that we're doing. And all audit firms are going to procedurally do this differently, but 2 big things we're doing is the administration, the operation of the plan, consistent with the plan document. That's really what we're doing. The second big thing is the party charged with governance fulfilling their fiduciary duties. And it's surprising how often they aren't, actually. And those are opportunities that we uncover and give us opportunities then to go back to the advisor context that we have and say, hey, we've got a plan sponsor here. Here's the situation. Maybe they don't even have an advisor, or they're not meeting with their advisor regularly. This is somebody you should talk to. And, an opportunity for us to give a cross referral. So again, during the audit, things we're looking for, does the plan even have an advisor? Is someone helping them choose their investments? We tend to deal with a fair number in any given year of plans that require their first audit. Many of those don't have an advisor and could use some help. We're going to ask to look for the minutes of committee meetings. I actually went and did a little search, excuse me, on our industry audit guide that is published by the AICPA. Looks like I spelled it incorrectly there on the slide. Sorry about that. It's the AICPA. But I just did a word search on minutes, and it showed up many places. And I pulled in one of those extracts. We really, as auditors, are asked to look at the minutes of the plan committees. And why do we do that? We want to know what's going on with the plan. Those minutes oftentimes talk about changes to the plan, amendments to the plan, who's monitoring the investments, that sort of thing. So we become aware of and familiar with how well or if those things are being done, and then can talk to the parties involved and see if there's some opportunity to improve upon those things. During the audit, we're looking for things like a signed plan document and an adoption agreement. It's incredible how many times we ask for those documents, we get them, and nobody has signed them. No signed document, no plan. So that's important. We're going to make sure that all of the adopting employers are mentioned, covered in the document. We're looking for written loan policies, current tax determination letters, and whether or not participant notices are being issued, and are they being issued in a timely manner. Common findings, and when I say common, just to give you some perspective, I would say 20 to 25% of the audits we look at annually have one or more of these sorts of findings. So common means pretty regularly. Pretty commonly, we find an overall lack of controls. No committee, no advisor, no consultant. That's what I'm talking about, but lack of controls. Or simply just one person running the plan. Maybe it's somebody in payroll, maybe it's somebody in HR, performing all of the functions and no oversight. Use of an incorrect definition of compensation, commonly overtime and bonuses. The plan document will say, include or exclude those items from the definition of compensation when you calculate contributions. It's amazing how often those get missed when it actually comes time to calculate those contributions. Forfeitures being used timely. Essentially, just think of it as forfeitures should be zeroed out once a year. That gets missed frequently. Deposits being made timely. Who knows what timely is? We generally look at 5 business days, and that's where we start asking questions. It's a gray area, and it's facts and circumstance based. Required minimum distributions and plan expenses. Now we're not in a position to opine on whether or not plan expenses are too high, too low, or just right. But we do want to know if somebody is monitoring them with an advisor or consultant, and if they're periodically benchmarking them. And if they're not, again, that's an opportunity for us to speak to the advisor on the plan if they have one, or to introduce one that can help out in that regard. On the horizon, we have some things coming up. Pooled employer plans, to my understanding, are going into effect January 1. Remains to be seen how well that's received in the marketplace. It is going to present some advantages for plan sponsors as far as cost savings, relieving some administrative burden The few that we've talked to are looking at and pursuing 316 TPA services, which we think is great. It's another great point of contact for us and for information. But however, on the challenge side for the auditor, we're still going to need to gather source documents from each employer. And an example would be perhaps a form I-9 to verify a birth date and a hire date. So as an auditor, we can't just use a census file or a payroll file that has those dates in them. We actually have to go all the way back to the source. Where did that date come from? How do we know it's the right date? That's important because it triggers a participant's eligibility. It factors into their vesting, et cetera. So we actually need to go back to the source. And when we're suddenly working with an audit in a PEP situation, there are many employers. And all of those employers are going to have to provide some amounts of data in order to make this happen. The challenge becomes there's also always seems to be a few outliers. Many of the companies might get their information in for the audit, and then there's a couple outliers that don't, and that's going to delay the progress on completing the audit. But we've worked with multiple employer plans in today's environment on that. We have great experience in that, and we look forward to seeing some of those pooled employer plans in the future and helping out on those audits as well. Another item on the horizon are some new accounting standards that I'm not going to bore you too much with because they're very detailed and technical, but SAS 136 is coming out. It has been deferred until reporting periods ending on or after December 15, 2021. So those will be, think of it as the calendar year 2021 audits that are conducted during 2022. So it's another year out into the future, but it's going to eliminate what's currently known as the limited scope audit. The limited scope audit for years has caused confusion even among auditors in them thinking that they have to do a limited amount of work, which is really not the case. A limited scope audit really is not significantly different in scope of work from a full scope audit. Sounds like it is, but it's not. And that caused great confusion and it drove poor quality results, et cetera. So these standards have been written to address that. And the whole term limited scope audit is actually going away. And the auditor's report is going to look different starting with those 2021 calendar years. The standards require certain communications from the auditor. And just briefly, when we see non-compliance with laws and regulations, so that would be things like I mentioned earlier, not including bonuses in the calculation of contributions when they should have. That would be a non-compliance with the regulations, or significant findings or issues. So a significant finding might be the document wasn't signed, as I mentioned earlier. There's no committee meeting and keeping minutes of those, poor controls. Those things will be required to be communicated in writing and actually lead to some great plan committee discussion topics for the committee to consider, look at, and then consider on how they might change things going forward to bring the plan back into compliance. So I mentioned earlier, and I just will touch on briefly, we as a firm have a unique approach. The typical plan audit that you probably have seen in the industry, starts in July or August and concludes in October. And that's borne out in the statistics that I mentioned earlier. And that really is just a reflection of the business model of the traditional accounting firm. They have other things going on throughout the year, and they fit in plan audits during the business cycle in which it fits their business model, and that is perfectly fine. However, it can lead to compressed timelines, rush at the end, and can have a negative effect on quality. So we take a different approach. Plan audits are the only thing that our firm does. So we do our work year round. We'll start testing before the year ends. Why wait? Pick a sample and do some testing before the year ends. And that way, if you find a problem, it can typically be fixed and isolated to the year in which it occurred. We have found that to be a very efficient means of conducting these audits and helping plan sponsors proactively keep their plans in compliance, and then wrap up the final testing and whatnot that we're going to do after year end in the spring, and start issuing those final audit reports before the initial July deadline. So when it comes to winning new business, that's one of my favorite areas. You know, the number crunching and the technical guidance and report writing is certainly one thing, but one of the things that I enjoy about our practice is talking with prospects, advisors, and going out and jointly looking to bring in some new business. So some ways that I think the advisors that we work with have set themselves apart is that I showed you earlier some of the talking points we can give them. It shows that they know things about the plan heading into the conversation. They can get some insights from us before having those prospect conversations. And then, you know, if any of you are looking at some prospects, we'd be more than happy to do that for you. It's not something we charge for. It's just something that we do as a way to help all of us be successful in our practice and do what we can to serve the plan sponsor community. We're very happy to work with advisors and consultants in that regard. So with that, my contact information is here, and I'm sure that it'll be available to you after today's presentation. And if there are any questions there, Ari, we will go ahead and take those.
Do you think PEP audits will cost more than regular audits?
Well, depends what more is. So they will be, it's interesting. We've looked at some, and they'll be uniquely priced. I'll give you an example of one that we looked at. We had a provider reach out to us for, it's just a hypothetical, 20 employers, assume each had 50 participants. So the way we priced that audit was with a base fee that was a pretty close reflection to what a single audit would cost. And then we had a marginal, you know, per employer cost that we added on. So whatever the number was, if you had 20 additional employers times X, whatever that delta is, that would be the increase in the audit cost. And that really is a reflection of, you know, the base fee covers, you know, writing the report, doing the file review, all of that sort of thing that needs to be done on every audit. And then the differentiator, the uptick for each additional employer had to do with, you know, the increase in sample sizes and the additional information that we'll need as auditors to get from each and every employer that participates.
Mike Webb always, this is something that we talked about recently. How did filing 5,500 so late become such a universally accepted practice? Was it always this way?
Well, I don't know about always. It seems like it has. I'll just give you my opinion. And I believe, again, it really goes back to the traditional accounting firm business model. So if you think of a traditional accounting firm, and I spent 26 years in a traditional accounting firm, from January to May, staff is very busy doing either commercial audits, reviews, and compilations, or tax work. May 1st comes, they're burned out. They go on vacation. They've earned it. No consideration or whatnot is even going to be given to doing a 401k audit until July. And then the first is, well, let's go ahead and extend. We've got till October 15. So they might do a little planning in July, but work in earnest really begins in August. And then they wrap up and try to issue for the October 15 deadline, as we've seen in those statistics. And then shortly after October, you know, the next thing you have is Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, holidays, and the cycle repeats. The danger that I have seen many plans fall in is when you find a problem, and you find that problem in August and September, there's very little time to get it fixed correctly, fixed, you know, in a right way, so to speak, any sort of quality. And sometimes those filings then never happen. that audit doesn't get issued, but it sits on somebody's desk until next July again, when we resume the cycle, generally. So that's just my, from being in the industry for many years, what I have seen. And again, that's really because that's what fits the business model of a traditional accounting firm.
Do you ever, Mike asks again, do you ever get requests from plan sponsors that are not subject to ERISA to audit their plans?
We actually do. We have a plan sponsor that when we first were engaged by them, we were doing their audit. They had a history of some compliance problems. Their participant count dropped below the 100 threshold to require an audit, but they asked us to continue. We're doing something called agreed upon procedures. It's similar to an audit. It doesn't result in an audited financial statement, but is a set of procedures that are very similar to doing an audit. Testing contributions, vesting, distributions, loans, all of this very similar testing that you would do on an audit, we continue to do for them, even though it's not required. So we can and have found ways to add value to that process. And we do from time to time have employers reach out and ask us to do some of those things, even though they may not be required.
Okay. Last but not least, can you elaborate the bit of the difference between limited scope and full scope audits? I always thought that limited scope audits were a good thing since the auditor did not have to audit the financials of the record keeper for the plan. Perhaps I'm mistaken.
Yeah, so just big picture, really the only difference between a full scope audit and a limited scope audit has to do with the work an auditor does around the plan's investments. So on a full scope audit, an auditor has to test the valuation of the investments, which is usually pretty easy. Think of a mutual fund. We can look at independent sources for share pricing, et cetera. So we have to test the valuation. We have to test the existence of those assets. So we actually have to send out a confirmation to whoever holds the assets and ask them to confirm that, yes, we hold the assets and here's what they're worth, the dollar amount. And then we have to test the income earned by the investments. And that, again, with mutual funds, you can look up things like the dividend history, the changes in the share price throughout the year, and conduct some testing on the income earned. Those three things that I just mentioned are really the only difference between a full scope and a limited scope audit. So testing valuation, existence, and income earned, which, depending on what the assets are, if they're mutual funds, it's generally pretty easy to do. And you're looking at a, 3 to 6 hour sort of project as being the difference between doing full scope versus limited scope. On limited scope, you don't have to do those things.
Okay. James, I appreciate it. And of course, everybody, contact information is there. And thanks again so much for being so informative.
Thank you, Ari. Appreciate it.
And let me get to my thing and hopefully you can see it in about a minute. Okay. My presentation, pretty quick one. Does everybody see it? I am screen sharing, so apparently I am. Of course, you wouldn't know it. It feels like 2020 will never end, but it is 2 weeks away. And so let's talk about some of the issues that are going on, as well as a short plug for my conference. Of course, the legacy of COVID. There are continued issues of planned terminations, partial terminations, any other COVID relief that may happen. Nothing of the sorts dealing with the retirement plans, but you never know. And even with the COVID vaccine, expect some changes in this business. I really believe a legacy of COVID is that you're going to see a lot of cutback on travel in terms of conferences and enrollment meetings. Zoom is here to stay for events enrollments. Talked to an advisor client of mine, and yesterday in New York, we had a snowstorm. And he was remarking how efficient he was thanks to the technology and having meetings and not having to bother go see the client and whatnot. And so therefore, you're going to see a future, in my opinion, after a vaccine of a cutback in travel in both attending conferences as well as enrollment meetings. And of course, hopefully we will be back live in Minneapolis on June the 11th, 2021. That's the plan. And of course, as my grandmother once said, life doesn't go to plan. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully we will be back live at that time. We have other events to reschedule: St. Louis, Houston, Las Vegas. Las Vegas is probably sometime next year, December. St. Louis and Houston, we'll see what happens in terms of allowing back fans into the stadiums. PEPs, of course, that's what we're all thinking about with the implementation date of January 1. They are not the greatest thing since sliced bread. We have seen this before.
Ari,
Yes.
I just wanted to mention your PowerPoint's not open. All we see is the virtual PowerPoint name, but it looks like you need to click it on to open it.
You see it now?
I do not.
That's weird because it shows that it is playing. Hold on. Let me go back to the beginning. I appreciate you telling me this.
Well, I'm seeing the chats, and I thought I better say something.
I appreciate it.
So now you do the share screen at the bottom and bring up the PowerPoint.
Yeah, hold on one second. I got to start it over again and hold on. Okay, do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So let's go from beginning. Again, the legacy of COVID. PEPs are not the greatest thing since sliced bread. With PEPs, we've seen it before as open multiple employer plans. It won't be the game changer that people are making it out to be. Many large providers are not going to offer it. They see it as cannibalizing their business. It's, again, all about collecting assets, as the costs of an audit will be a PEP killer. Yes, the audit exemption is bigger, as James pointed out, but it's still a problem. I still think that 90 to 95% of these PEPs are going to fail. Instead of your own, consider partnering up with larger PEPs. I'm setting up PEPs as a PPP and as an attorney. Don't cannibalize your business by focusing on PEPs. You will cut your nose to spite your face. Marketing should be on delegation of fiduciary function. The actual savings and fees will likely not materialize unless it's a mega PEP. Still no guidance on many issues. I'm working on one plan that you see the logo with PCS. I'm working on another plan with a provider offering a plan with Alaris that is a solo 401k PEP. So I'm working with a 338 advisor that many of you know. We're going into the solo 401k plan business because the fact of the matter is that more solo 401k plans get no guidance, get no support. You got to open up an account over there at the local brokerage branch, and that's about it. So more about that on later. Other points to consider: litigation is always going to be there. Mutual fund companies are always going to get sued. We may see more unique cases like the Shell case where, you're questioning whether participant data is a plan assets. MEPs have become a huge target now. Eventually, PEPs will be once they become substantive in size. So many advisors and TPAs have neglected their clients during COVID. Maybe it's a time to pounce. Consolidations are going to be a big thing as bigger players look for acquisition. And of course, we've started the cycle 3 restatement process. People like me have to eat as well. So we have that process that's going to continue till July 31st, 2022. So if you have defined contribution plans using a pre-approved plan, this is your time to get a restatement done. And of course, I'm shilling a lot. That 401k National Virtual Conference, 2 days, January 21, 22, 2021, all virtual, all on Zoom, all the features of a live conference. And again, no food, sorry. The early bird is passed. Now it's $33.33 to be a part of it. Other tiers will include autographs. We got presentations on PEPs, plan audits. Sherry Fitz will be there on marketing. Plenty of tools to grow your business. On day one, we're going to have Walt Frazier talking to us, as well as Dwight Gooden on day two. Celebrate Dwight. He was the very first guest, the very first that 401k conference at Citi Fields 2.5 years ago. Congressman Jamie Raskin will be part of the event. We're actually going to have to move him to day two because of scheduling. I didn't want to schedule him at 9:30 in the morning, which would be 6:30 in the morning for people on the West Coast. So he'll be on day two. Had to schedule the time for 15 minutes. Of course, the new Congress being sworn in, and Thursdays and Fridays are days of business. So he will meet with us probably around 3 o'clock on day two to talk to us about what's going on Capitol Hill. Day one, Ron Nearing will be there. He was a guest at our event in Orlando this past March. It feels like last year, but it was only about 9 months ago. He's an MSNBC conservative commentator, which is actually a thing. He was spokesperson for Ted Cruz when he ran for president in 2016, and he was also a commentator on Al Jazeera, which is a thing in Washington as well. Day two, the Retireholics are live, and some of our sponsors with presentations. Of course, it's a list that is growing. Pension Assurance, Matrix, Russell, PCS, Granite Group Advisors, Keenan Mutual, Value Point Associates Nationwide, as well as others. The cost, again, that's going to be $33.33 to attend. To sponsor, we top up at $2,500 gold, but most plan sponsors are doing the $1,500 silver to talk for 30 minutes. More information is on my website, and that's it. So we get to end early. If there are any questions, I don't see any questions, but let me get out of my PowerPoint. But again, Retireholics will be a blast. Should be great having them on. They'll be part of our Zoom. And again, I appreciate everybody tuning in, even for today. What jersey I'm wearing today, I am wearing a Dave Taylor Los Angeles Kings jersey, one of my most prized Mitchell Ness jerseys since they're out of the hockey jersey business. And I've always liked the Laker colors for the Kings. So without further ado, our next panelist is Roger Jorgensen from Alaris. He will talk to us about what I think is a part of the business that a lot of advisors neglect and really should focus on. And I've seen in the last couple of years that they are focusing on it. And that is HSA plans. So Roger, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Ari. I'm excited to present. I mean, I look for every opportunity to talk about health savings accounts and especially to advisors. And the reason is I believe advisors are going to carry HSAs to the next level. And you'll understand why I say that as I go through this presentation. So HSAs are just an incredible product. I'm going to share a little bit about them as we go forward. In other conferences, I've had people come up. A lot of times people come up and ask me their personal situation, personal question. There's a lot of variance with how you can use an HSA, how it can work on your behalf. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cover a few different things, just talk about where they're at today. Then I'm going to talk about the way HSA users view their accounts. I've done thousands, because I've been doing this for 17 years, thousands of open enrollment meetings, PowerPoint presentations to participants. Normally they're live. This year it's been all virtual, which means I can do about 3 more a day. So it's really been kind of a crazy time, but fun nonetheless. And then after I talk about how people view their HSAs, then I want to talk about HSAs in their retirement. There might be some things that you're not aware of. I had yesterday, I had a conference call when we did a WebEx with an advisor. And seriously, at the end of it, he said, wow, this is great. I had no idea. I'm going to begin promoting this more. I'm going to look at actually enrolling in the HSA plan. He's had access to it. He just never has done it because he just didn't know. And I'm available to talk through these things and talk about that. And then I want to talk about the advisor's opportunity, because there's a huge opportunity here, and you might not realize the opportunity, but I'm going to talk about that, as I close too. So where are we at today? So now, at the end of 2019, there were, and by the way, I have my screen blocked, so I'm going to look, 28 million HSAs. Now, some of them, people spend down. That's the non-funded accounts, right? But there are people who fund their accounts, and there are people who are looking for investment options. The HSAs in terms of assets now, at the end of 2019, we're at almost $66 billion, right? $66 billion. And yet, if you look at that in the blue, 50 billion of it sitting in cash. Most HSA owners think of it like a flexible spending account, pre-tax dollars used to reimburse healthcare. I'm going to show you what the value of it is in the retirement, and hope you'll really get a flavor for that. I know with my own personal financial advisor, when we sat down with him about 5 years ago, and they showed our assets up on the screen, and I said, "Where's my HSA?" My HSA at that time had 50 grand in it. Why isn't that on the board? And so we had a great conversation going back and forth. And within 6 months, his agency had implemented a high deductible plan with an HSA because it really fits who they are and what they're trying to do. So in here, the first two bullet points I kind of mentioned are that 15 billion of dollars is 24% of HSA assets. Notice that the investor of an HSA has 7 times larger balance than the non-investor, right? Some of the people get it. Some on the financial services side, sometimes with law firms and professional groups, they may get it that they can put money away in this and grow it. And even in, I do a lot of cooperatives and a lot of manufacturing, and there's a number of people who get it there too. And I think what happens is once you get over 40, you start thinking about retirement, and then an HSA can really make even more sense than it does if you're 35 or 30. So again, HSA assets in billions that are invested. There's been movement the last 3 years. I really think that's what this slide represents. If you take the last 3 years and take a look, 56% of the accounts opened in the last 3 years. I really think some of that's movement. Initially banks opened up and had HSAs, but they had no investment options. A lot of those have moved, are moving. Some of the banks have quit doing HSAs. We're a bank, but we were acquired. Our TPA was acquired almost 5 years ago now, and they get it because those are deposits to a bank. And so a bank can earn money on the money, and so they can offer non-revenue sharing fund lineups, and we can pay the advisor. So I'll talk more about that in just a second. Notice mostly at 37% of the assets in those accounts opened in the last 3 years. Just a little bit about HSAs. And this is, there's certain important things I just really feel that I need to convey every time, right? The triple tax advantage, no tax going in, no tax on the growth, no tax as it's paid out for qualified expenses. It's a trust established in the account holder's name. At termination, it's their money. It goes wherever they go. At retirement, it's better than their 401k plan. I'll talk more about that as I get there. But then at death, my wife's favorite is, hey, if I die, it's her money, right? It goes to a spouse as an HSA, anybody else as a taxable asset, like a checking or savings account. So how do HSA users view their accounts? Unfortunately, many of them view it as a pass-through account, right? Pre-tax savings, they get that because they might have had a flexible spending account, or they might have a limited use flexible spending that works with the HSA. They can pay for out-of-pocket expenses or deductibles. They have high deductibles, so that makes a lot of sense. Kind of like their old flexible spending account plan used to be with the use it or lose it, only this rolls over, this earns interest, this can be invested. Over 90% of the HSAs are in this category. People have no idea what they have in terms of the HSA, and I'm going to tell you why that is as we get towards the end of the presentation. Right? Contributions go in without tax, no state, federal, Social Security tax. There's 2 states that apply state tax, California and New Jersey, but the rest of them, there's no state tax, no FICA. It makes sense for an employer who's offering HSAs to offer them and to do education. The reason is because they save for every dollar that's put in, they're going to save for every $1,000, $76.50, right? 7.65% is FICA and Medicare tax. That's a real savings for the employer. And so encouraging education, helping the people understand how they can build this balance and how it can mean something for them into retirement is really essential in the education piece. And I'll explain to you why that's not happening kind of as we go forward. So in 2020, the amount that you could put in for if you had single coverage is $3,550, and for family, $7,100, and that amount's indexed for inflation. So it's going up in 2021 to $3,600 single, $7,200 family, and if you're 55 or older, you can put in an additional $1,000, right? So I've been contributing to the maximum since their inception 17 years ago, and have built up quite a balance. It's going to serve us well into retirement, and I'm going to show you why in just a moment. One of the great things about an HSA, though, for a young person who's not fully funding it, is they can change their contribution at any time. So if something happens and they wish they would have put more in, they can simply change the contribution, notify whoever does payroll, increase their contribution, then they could set up a payment plan with a provider and pay it out over time. And that's part of the education that we provide to account holders is here's how you can maximize your HSA so that you're not paying out the principal continually. In terms of taking money out of the HSA, you can take money out of your HSA at any time for any reason, right? It's never taxed if it's a distribution for qualified expenses. Hence, the reason it's better than a 401k is I can draw money out of it for qualified expenses and never be taxed. And I'm going to talk about what those qualified expenses are. Additionally, if I'm 65 or older, I can take it out and pay income tax on it just like my 401k. However, if I'm under age 65, there's an additional 20% excise tax if I use it for something not eligible, non-qualified, right? If I use it to go on a vacation, that is not a qualified expense. And when I do my taxes in that year, if I say I don't have receipts for the money I took out, I'll pay tax plus a 20% excise tax. This is my favorite feature of an HSA is you don't have to take the money out in the year you incur the expense. You can wait for as long as you like to take that money out. Now, I've had advisors come up to me and tell me they didn't know that, right? That's just one of the key pieces to an HSA is I don't have to take money out. I can pay for something, keep the receipt, because that means I can take the money out anytime in the future, right? So bank those receipts and then look at taking that money out in the future. And I'll explain to you one of the reasons you want to do that when you go into retirement. So what are those qualified expenses? Medical, dental, vision, hearing, all of the expenses, so they're all medically necessary kinds of things. There's that 213D, anything in the diagnosis, treatment, cure, mitigation of any disease or any problem that affects any structure or function of the body. That structure or function of the body involves all the dental and vision and hearing issues that can happen. And those expenses are all qualified expenses. And then premium at age 65, which for most Americans are going to certainly be B and D, but it could also be a Medicare Advantage plan, which is Medicare C. Those premiums are eligible to be reimbursed. There's a prohibition on Medicare reimbursement policies, Medigap policies. You can't use your HSA to pay for those. But I'm going to explain to you how, if I know that, if I'm banking my receipts, how I can use my HSA to pay for those Medicare reimbursement policies later when I need to do that. Long-term care insurance policies are eligible for reimbursement, their premium, and then COBRA insurance. So COBRA insurance, when you terminate employment, you're offered to continue the coverage, you can use your HSA to pay for that. And then all dependent expenses are covered. Regardless if they're covered by the insurance or not, I could have a spouse on another health plan. Their expenses are eligible, co-pays, deductibles, medical, dental, vision, hearing, all of those expenses are eligible for my HSA, whether or not they're covered by the plan or not. What's not covered? Cosmetic services, something entirely for appearance purposes, not medically necessary, and then general health items like vitamins, supplements, health club dues. Those things are general health items. They promote wellness, but they're not medically necessary, and therefore they're not eligible expenses. Another way people look at the HSA, and I've seen this happen as we do presentations and talk to people, they see it as a robust savings vehicle. You know, not the typical savings account, right? Because there's no interest income tax. Now, interest rates are low, but I can tell you within, I don't know, it was maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago, we had a guaranteed interest contract that was paying 4.5% interest in the HSA. Today, it's, you know, the typical savings bank rate. But anyways, that interest income that can be imputed in a savings account doesn't happen in an HSA. And there's no taxes I pay out for those qualified expenses, as I've been mentioning. You don't have to spend the money on the expense until you want to. In other words, I can pay for that expense, hold on to the receipt, and then reimburse myself at some point in the future. So it ends up being a great savings vehicle. A number of years ago, when after I had an HSA, I was doing our taxes, and we had a little money market fund for emergencies, hot water heater blows, or something happens, and we have to replace that. So that money was sitting, and there was probably about $3,000, and I'm paying the tax on the interest income for that year. And that was prior to having everything online. I was searching high and low for that statement that I had gotten in the mail so I could pay what the few dollars or whatever I had to pay. That's when it occurred to me. The next time I have a medical expense, I'm going to spend that money out. Now our savings for those emergency things are sitting in my HSA. They're earning interest. They can be invested. If I need the money, I can request it and have it within 2 days. And I have a receipt for that medical expense that'll cover it. Now, it took a little bit longer to convince my wife, who helps manage the money, that this was a good idea. But once I laid it out for her, that's exactly what we did. We spent that money out. That money's still sitting in my HSA unused. We can take it out anytime we want because of that medical expense. The third way that people viewed their account is as an investment vehicle. I mean, in the early days, you know, sole proprietors, S corps, you know, they were all jumping on board. They really saw this as a great opportunity because there's no capital gains on an HSA, right? You don't have to pay any tax on the gains within the HSA. And we can now duplicate the same funds as a 401k. And that's critical for the advisor because now we're talking about the same fund lineup. We have a limitation of 25 funds, but we can take those funds that are in the 401k, and with the advisor's help, we can actually then produce those as the HSA fund lineup. The advisor, again, I'm not talking about the individual, but based on the fund lineup, can give some general advice in the meetings. And then also we have a tool that will help them select a portfolio for them based on their risk tolerance, and it'll use those funds that the advisor has picked. We can do models, we can do target date funds, and there's no required minimum distribution on an HSA. So if people are healthy and they want to let that money ride, they can let it ride. And by the way, because this is an advisor conference, I can tell you we can pay the advisor on the assets, right? And so that's a huge piece to involve. And simply, in my mind, it's incorporating education into the retirement plan conversation to talk more about, I think, what the real purpose of the HSA is the opportunity to save for retirement. And that's what I'm going to talk about now. HSAs in retirement as a retirement vehicle. Fidelity mentions that a couple retiring today needs $295,000 in after-tax income to pay for their healthcare expenses. Now that $295,000 doesn't include dental and vision, right? This is just talking about medical stuff, right? And the Kaiser Family Foundation says retirees will spend 3 times the amount on healthcare than the average working household does, right? So it gives you an idea that the healthcare is going to be critical for retirees. And so how can the HSA benefit them? That's what I'm going to talk about. But first, the categories of those retiree expenses: 20% on drugs, prescription drugs, 40% on Medicare B and D premiums, could include Medicare C as well, an Advantage plan. And then other medical expenses, which include the co-payments, the co-insurance, the deductibles. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that. I'm going to show you how Medicare is not free. You know, everybody thinks it's free or inexpensive. It really isn't. And I'm going to show you that in just a moment. Another thing that happens is people might want to retire before 65. But one of the critical issues is continuing their health insurance, right? How do they do that? Well, if they retire 18 months from age 65, they could actually take COBRA for those 18 months, and they can use their HSA to pay for that COBRA premium. So if that's one of their goals, is to retire before 65, again, their HSA can pay for that COBRA premium. Part A of Medicare is hospital coverage. Now, there's no premium if you or your spouse have worked for 40 quarters, right? So there's no cost to it. But unfortunately, people think that means it's no expense, free. You get free hospital coverage. That's not the case. There's a $1,408 deductible that happens up front on Part A of Medicare. If you were confined, there's a daily copay after 60 days of $352 a day. And for skilled nursing, after the 21st day, there's $176 a day. And then after 100 days, basically you're cut off. All right, so all of these expenses are eligible to be paid from a health savings account. And then Part B is doctor coverage. And now the premiums for B are deducted from Social Security check, as well as Part D, which is the prescription drug, which I'm coming to. These are deducted from a Social Security check. And I can tell you, I've had friends looking at what they're going to make in Social Security, you know, when they take it, right? Thinking they're going to get a check for that amount. That is not going to be the check they're going to get. They're going to get it reduced by their premiums for Part B and Part D. The standard premium, and this can vary, but in 2020 is $146.60 for Part B coverage. However, if you make more money, then it's indexed and it can cost you more. So you can see if you're making $200,000, $250,000, your Part B coverage will actually be $289.20. Now, what they do is after they go back and look back 2 years and adjust it as you are in retirement for a period of time. So if your income reduces, then they will take that and adjust it. But if it doesn't, these are the premiums that you could be paying. Now, Part D of coverage is prescription drug coverage, right? That premium is $32.74. Now, there's different parts of drug coverage, right? Some people are on specialty drugs, and so it's important to know what those costs are going to be. The premium just for the drug coverage is that, but that also can be surcharged. This is added to. These premiums are added to. So that $250,000, you add $3,150 to the $3,274, so you'll be paying, $64 in premium on that Part D. And just most people have no idea what Medicare is going to cost. Again, they're just assuming they're going to have it, but they haven't planned for it, right? And then Medicare C, I did it out of order because Medicare C is an Advantage plan. You either buy a Medicare C plan, Advantage, or you buy a Medicare supplement, or what's also called a Medigap policy, right? You buy one or the other if you want to have coverage that helps you for the things that Medicare's not paying for. And so those premiums range from, really can be more than $160, but they're kind of priced well now. That's why they're outselling supplements. Now, the two states I really monitor is Arizona and Minnesota, right? And so I know that the Advantage plans are outselling supplements, but just a couple of years ago, the supplements were outselling Advantage plans. A Medicare supplement policy is an insurance product. A Medicare Advantage plan is a county-based. They get a stipend from Medicare to manage your care. They get that payment each month, and they're essentially going to manage your care. That's a Medicare Advantage plan. It can often include prescriptions. It can include dental and vision. They're really loaded up right now. I have friends who are looking at buying a Medicare plan, and the Medicare Advantage plan was like $100 less a month. However, they're tied to a county, and there are some options outside the county, to have care. Some things are covered, but you just have to be careful with that and kind of know your plans. Again, most people don't know that, and they don't know the cost. And again, these plans renew every year, so the cost can renew. Now, the Medicare supplements or Medigap policies, around $230 a month per person. They're pretty stable, but they renew annually, right? And so it's just one of those considerations. Are you better with an insurance product? Does it allow me to travel more? Are there things that I can happen? I know you can go from a Medicare supplement policy, Medigap policy, to Medicare C anytime, but it's not always easy to go from Medicare C to go to a supplement. You might have to undergo underwriting. So it's just more information about how these things have to be planned for retirement. Couple strategies as I talk to people who are getting close to retirement or even starting out is bank your expenses. Don't take the money out. I'm on a high blood pressure medication because I work with people like Ari, right? My $10 a month, right? I pay that out of pocket. I take a picture of the receipt. I accumulate them over time. I've got probably now hundreds of them, and I can take that out sometime in the future, cash, tax-free, take it out, have it transferred and spend it out on anything I want because I've kept the receipts. That is banking those expenses, saving the receipts. Now, here's my strategy. I now have thousands of dollars that I have banked. My wife knows if I die, it's her money, so she won't let me spend any money out of it anyways. So it's sitting there and it's growing, and those expenses we've paid for out of pocket. Once the kids left the house, once they moved on and got jobs, all of a sudden it felt like we were swimming in money, and that's why we pay for all those things out of pocket. And those expenses we can draw out into retirement and pay for our Medicare supplement policy, which is not an eligible expense under an HSA. But those other expenses we paid for and just never took out, earned interest on it or have it invested, those we can take out anytime we want in the future. And that can help pay for our Medicare supplement policy. Once we want that money, all we have to do is simply transfer it back. And that'll be true of Medicare B, or if someone takes an Advantage Plan C and D, those prescription drug premiums, they can just simply transfer the money right back into their HSA and have that as spendable income. Now, here's the advisor opportunity. This is why I love speaking at any advisor event. This is so important to understand. You guys, you're focused on retirement savings and investment education, right? That is the goal, right? That is the HSA. That's the motto of the HSA for those of us who've had them for years. Build in the HSA education into those presentations. Duplicate the 401k funds. You can get paid on the assets. And the question is, would employers be open to do that? I can tell you it's their primary concern with HSAs. And that is, this is from Plan Sponsor Council of America, that the number one overriding concern about implementing and maintaining HSAs is the education of the employee. That's where I come in. That's where I assist. I've got videos, we have materials, but we try to get the education level up of the employees. The more they contribute, the more FICA and Medicare tax savings there is for the employer, We just calculated the other day, my wife and I, it's over $600 for my employer savings just on my HSA contributions by my putting the money in pre-tax through payroll. They will save that money in FICA and Medicare tax, and you take that. We're an organization of 1,000 employees. They take that 600 times 1,000. If everybody were contributing to the maximum on family, it'd be significant savings for that group. So that's the number one reason. And I just want to mention this. HSA participants are in a sense, are much more savvy on a number of things, but they are missing out on the value of investing. Only, as I've said, 13%. Another slide will say 15%. But only 13% have invested their HSA assets, and 54% don't even know they might have that as an option to be able to invest that. And I'm going to explain why that is. How can they not know that, right? They know about their 401k because you guys are talking about, but they don't know that about their HSA. I'm going to tell you why in just a second. 20% claim they have very little confidence in the topic of investments. We have a county that we've got the HSAs in, and I went in there and none of them were invested. And I sat there and did a little meeting for them and provided them with a video and to get there so they can take advantage of those investments. And there's a tool that'll help them do it, right? The advisor doesn't have to sit down with them. We have a tool that'll actually take them through those funds and help them assign percentages based on risk tolerance and help them do that. But they're just not getting that level of education. So why are 87% of the assets not invested? Because they don't get any financial guidance. Matter of fact, they hardly get any information at all in the benefits meeting. I'm going to talk more about that in just a moment. But I just want to say, this is so important to understand. The reason I say the HSA is better than a 401k, it's on the medical side. If I take the money out, $100,000, what am I going to pay in tax on that 100,000 as I draw it out of my 401k? It depends on my tax bracket, right? But I will pay absolutely no tax when I draw that out of my HSA to pay for those qualified expenses. Right. So as we align HSA investments with 401k investments, advisors will influence employees toward greater savings and investing. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I took out a slide, but I just want to mention, I just want to go back to this whole idea. Yeah, the slide that I took out said that in the average benefits meeting, right? What are they talking about? They're talking about the increase in out-of-pocket expenses. If any of you been to your benefits meeting, talking about, did the deductible go up? Are the out-of-pocket costs more? Does the premium change? Is the premium up? That's what you're talking about. Then you might talk about dental insurance, vision insurance, long-term care, the EAP. Now in COVID, the EAP is getting like 10 minutes in an hour-long presentation. How much time is the HSA getting? Very little, right? And so when it's aligned with savings and retirement and talked about by an advisor with the 401k, it's of great value. It will increase contributions to the plan. Every employer is interested in that because what it means is more security for the employee as they save for those out-of-pocket expenses, not only now, but into retirement. So that's it. That's what I preach every day, all the time. Build your HSA balance. It will serve you well in the future. I'll see if there are any questions. I'll quit sharing my slide though. So if there's anybody else.
Quite a few questions.
Yeah, good. Okay, let me see here. How do we make the administration of HSA easier? So many issues with payroll and the funds flowing in my experience. I don't find that. Now, I've been doing this for 17 years. I really don't see that. I would like to talk to you about those things that you've seen, because I can tell you we have a implementation process. The implementation process is we get some information about the company. Then they send that back to us. And then we set up a call, and we have a 45-minute call talking about how the money moves, how you do enrollment. Do you need any, what do you want for materials? And we go through all of that. At the end of that, everybody in that company who's involved, whether it's payroll or HR, they all understand what the process is and what needs to happen to have a good experience. And then it's on us to educate the participants, make sure they understand how they can access their account, how they can use the mobile app to archive those receipts, all of the things that go into that. Do you invest using your HSA funds? Yes. Do I? I'm not sure exactly what that question is. Yes, I've been invested. I've done that since the inception. We have a threshold of $2,000 because that's what the debit card draws from. And so the debit card has to draw from the cash account. People will use vision and dental and spend over $1,000 on a card swipe. So we have a 2,000 threshold. Anything above 2,000 can go into the investments. My account now, just to tell you, is over $100,000. But I just had a gentleman that I talked to the other day. Is $140,000 now in his account. He's never spent a dime out. I've spent some money when I had kids in college and in a wedding for my daughter. I tap my HSA a little bit, but it continues to grow. Do you foresee fees becoming an issue as it relates to litigation and HSAs down the road a couple of years? Look, I'm from the insurance side. I am not an advisor. So I don't know. You guys have a lot more, right? There's a lot more.
I don't see it because you need a class action. To me, the money's in a class action, and who's got that kind of money in HSA? What kind of employer's got that kind of money in HSA that makes a class action worthwhile?
Right. The question on long-term care premiums. Yeah, there's a schedule, falls under 213D, a schedule the IRS produces. The younger you are, the less money. It doesn't really get significant until you're 50 or older. And so in all the presentations with participants, I mentioned that there is a schedule the IRS produces for long-term care insurance premiums. Only up to that amount would do it. Yeah.
Plus, wouldn't it also be a individual account? I mean, there's really no employer sponsorship. I mean, the employer's offering it, but it's an individual account. So how do you create a class action?
Yeah, that's right.
Individuals.
That's true too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I should have answered that. I'm just glancing at the questions, but yeah, they're individual trusts, right? So my HSA with a coworker, I have my own HSA. They have their own HSA. It just happens to, and there's a hold harmless against employers for administering that. And there, if you look at the legislation, there's also, you can match the 401k without invoking ERISA. And so the 401k funds, and that's why we do it that way. Well, we have a fund lineup that's not, associated with our 401 that we've had for years, and it involves 13 funds, right? And at some point, you just, people have too many funds to look at, so we try to limit it. And on the 401k side, we try to limit that to 25 funds. So if you have 35 funds, 10 of them might be target date funds, right? So we can eliminate most of those. But so we try to set it up that way to just make it more of from the different fund categories, and 25 seems to accommodate them. TDS for HSAs, that comes up a lot, and right now I don't see that coming. But maybe Ari, you can mention that or talk about that.
No, I haven't seen that. I mean, is it possible? I mean, sure, but I don't. That's not something that I've seen yet.
Yeah. HSA distributions do not count as income for Medicare B and D premium surcharge purposes. Yeah, that's correct. Retirement plan distributions, yeah, that's going to count as income in that list of what your income is. Yeah. If you're planning or retiring at age 65 or later, isn't an HSA an even better retirement savings vehicle than an unmatched 401k 403 due to the FICA? Yeah, absolutely. HSA is the greatest vehicle there is. I mean, you'd have to try to explain to me how it isn't, because everything I've seen, and again, I've only done this for 17 years, but I can tell you, it is the greatest savings vehicle there is. Is the biggest barrier to HSA growth the HDP tie-in, since it is so Well, you know what? Actually, I don't think that's the case because education goes a long way. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you what we do in a lot of groups. Over 100 groups now, I've got that they stack an HRA behind the HSA. So you do the HSA first, and let's say they buy a 6,000, 12,000 deductible. The first 3,000 might be on the employer, the first 2,000. But above that, a post-deductible HRA can reimburse. So now you've got the premium reduction by buying a high deductible, and that money is funded from an HRA by employer dollars. So it's really premium savings set aside to pay those claims. But I can tell you an HRA with that level at 3,000, 6,000 is not going to exceed 10% in terms of the loss ratio on those claims. So it ends up being a huge savings, and it's often allows an employer to make HSA contributions to the HSA because of the savings that they have with the high deductible health plan. And I'll tell you, here's another thing. What people don't realize, you take a look at your plan. If it's not an HDHP, look at what your out-of-pocket expenses are. Most of them are higher than a high deductible health plan, in Minnesota anyways. Look at the out-of-pocket limits. If you get hit by the proverbial bus, you're going to pay a lot no matter what plan you're on, right? But if you're on a high deductible health plan, all of that money can be pre-tax. Plus, if I didn't have enough money to put in this year, as I put it in next year, I can pay myself back for any of those expenses I didn't get reimbursed on. So it's just a great, when people understand it, the value of the HSA and how it can work, it's a much better health plan. Plus, if you look, some of the slides you didn't see are the education level of HSA participants. They know their health plan. They know how to access their health plan. They shop for things. My daughter had an MRI, was going to be $2,500. This is back in 2005, $2,500 MRI. And I got it for $413 at a freestanding MRI center. And I negotiated a 20% discount by paying in cash. Do you think if I had a $500 deductible or $1,000, I would have spent the time to do that? No. When I got my HSA, I was worried about tapping out half of it that year. I had a $5,000 family deductible, and I didn't want to spend $2,500 out on one MRI. I was freaking out. But I'll tell you what, got me into the health plan, got me to understand it. I had a broker friend that said, hey, did you ask for a cash discount? Didn't even hear of that. Never heard of it. So I did. And I got the cash discount, which got it down to $513. What is the actual administrative cost to employee to just offer HSA to their staff if, say, employee has 1,000, 1,500 employees versus employer with 500? Well, we tier our HSA. So groups under 50, I'm going to charge $3.50. There's no setup fee if it's over 25 participants, $100 setup fee if it's under 25 participants. But as the groups get bigger, you can go down to, we go down to $275, $250, $2 on large group. You can work it down. And here's the other part of it is that with assets, if we know the assets, then I can reduce the cost further because I know that's money coming in the door. Those are deposits. We can loan that money out as a bank. So we can offset the administrative fee based on assets. And so the more I can work with someone, the more information I can gather, the better off it is. Cost savings on payroll taxes, any other cost saving? Not really, except I will tell you this, you can't discount the education level for people who are vested in their HSA in terms of understanding what things cost. And that has a huge positive impact on a group. I went to a group, I went to Georgia to do an educational meeting, and the people in this plant said, hey, look, we got this guy and he's just bitter and will argue with you continually and he will say things, you just can't let him jerk your chain. You can't get upset with him. I said, all right, I'll try not to, right? I don't know what he's going to say to me. Maybe he doesn't like tall people. I'm 6'9". Maybe he doesn't like tall people. I have no idea. So at the end of the meeting, he stands up and he says, it's about damn time we got an HSA. And he sat down. And the HR people were going wild afterwards saying, wow, that was a positive comment. So that's just, I've had that experience time and again. When people understand the plan, understand how it works, understand how to get reimbursed, understand the pre-tax savings. Remember this, if I pay $3,000 out of my pocket, on a non-high deductible health plan, and I don't use a flexible spending account plan, most people don't because they don't realize they're going to have that expense, I've paid $1,000 in taxes to pay $3,000 of after-tax dollars right out of my pocket. Now, you math people might know the number's a little bit greater than that, but I'm just telling you, if I spend that $3,000 out of a high deductible with an HSA, I saved $1,000 in taxes that didn't come out of my check to go into that HSA, and that $3,000 is mine no matter what I do. The rest of my life, I have access to it and can always spend it out. And then Michael has a question. I was wondering about the same year tax consequences of using the HSA when the contribution was made earlier in the year. There is nothing. I can fund my HSA up until, as long as my HSA is open. The key is open the HSA. I tell participants, if it's voluntary, open your HSA, because if you open it, every claim is eligible. But I can fund my HSA for 2020 and up until the time I do my taxes, right? So if it's April 15th, I can fund my HSA for 2020 up until I do my taxes. And every expense I had throughout the year, if my account was established on January 1st of 2020, every expense is eligible to be reimbursed from my HSA. So they're really—
Just clarify that on Roger, because when I'm meeting with my accountant, I get a some tax form that I take to him, and he's using that to offset, the HSA contribution, and I'm not getting the full benefit, or it doesn't look to me that I'm getting the full benefit of the contribution that year.
Something's wrong. I'll just tell you that. So here's how it works. All right, I get, I put in the 8,200. I'm over. I know it doesn't look like it, but I'm over 55. Okay, so I put in
56.
No, it's 55 or older, right? So I put in. Oh, I look 56. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so I put in the $8,200, right? That's a tax deduction, dollar for dollar reduction in any tax that I have to pay. Right now, if I've done it pre-tax, I already got that. It's not included in income on my W-2. So I've already gotten it. But if I do it after tax, if I'm an independent contractor, sole proprietor, and I do it after tax, I get a state and federal tax deduction, except for those two states I mentioned before, for that amount, dollar for dollar reduction. The amount that I paid, the amount that I took out of it to pay for an expense, that's on a 1099 SA, right? That's the how much you put in on the 8889 form. It's got some different buckets. One is if it's employer money. Employer money is anything that passes through payroll. So my $8,200 is a contribution by my, through my employer, and so that goes on one line. My wife has an HSA. When she was 55, we opened an HSA for her. We put her 1,000 catch-up in there. We use after-tax dollars. I fund it through my checking account. That's a separate line on the 8889 form. That's $1,000. We get that's a dollar for dollar reduction in our taxes. $1,000 comes right off our tax liability when we do our taxes. And then it says enter in on the 1099 SA. How much did you take out of the account? You put that number in and it asks you this question: were there eligible expenses? Did you incur expenses? Do you have the receipts? And if you say yes, nothing happens unless you're audited. Then you walk in and you produce those receipts. If you're not audited, nothing happens. And I've been doing this for 17 years. I know one person, who has been audited. I teach continuing education classes for insurance professionals. I ask in every class, and nobody knows anybody audited. It kind of was like the early days of COVID. Nobody knew anybody, but now, now you might, but not with HSAs, So,
okay.
Talk to me after. My information was on there. Call me. I'd be glad. Look, just one other thing, Ari. When this started, I talked to more H&R Block people than I would ever care to admit for 2-3 years until they updated their software, explaining to them how it was supposed to work. And if I need to talk to an accountant on it, I am more than happy to do that. There's a lot of misconceptions. One of them is that everybody has to take Part A of Medicare when they turn 65. That's baloney. If you're working, you don't have to take Part A of Medicare. you know, that's delayed. There's a special enrollment to open it up later. All of these questions come up, you know, let me know if you have any questions. I'll be glad to answer them and help you out on that.
Roger, great again, as always. And for everybody, I thank everybody for attending. And of course, go to that 401ksite.com for further information about the big event, January 21, 22. Check and see what's out there. So again, everybody, Merry Christmas. Hanukkah's over with. Happy Kwanzaa. And of course, Happy New Year. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye.
Here, thanks, Ari.
Thank you.